Hello, world. Today I will be talking about Chinese soft power. Is it actually good now, and how has it evolved and changed over the past decade or several years? Now, for those of you who don't know, the strict dictionary definition of soft power is usually as follows: the ability of a country to influence others and shape their preferences through appeal, attraction, culture, political views, or foreign policies, rather than through coercion, or payment. All of us have witnessed or been influenced by soft power to some capacity, whether it would be Hollywood, American movies. I'd say America's kind of the king of soft power. Globally, you can see American movies and themes all around the world. Regardless of where you're watching this video from, I'm sure you've seen some Hollywood movies. Another example of this would be Japan with its anime, maybe J rock, which would be a bit smaller. And if we go to Korea, we'd see K dramas and K pop. So these are, in other terms, known as cultural exports. As for China and their cultural exports, even years ago, we all heard of Chinese food. We heard of kung fu movies, but a lot of these would come in a Western package or would open the gates for a sense of Orientalism and a sort of fetishization of Asia. A lot of these things, like kung fu movies, were cool, but it didn't have the same effect as today, where you see people actively wanting to become Chinese. It's a totally different feeling and influence than has ever really existed in the past. Even just several years ago, every time you'd hear something good about China, you'd essentially get accused of, oh, you're state sponsored. Oh, that can't be true. Oh, that's Chinese propaganda. And China really couldn't get a break when trying to promote anything about itself. And I think back then, China didn't know how to reach mass appeal as it does today. Today, you can see China's soft power in technology, movies, animations, video games. Pretty much every sector, you have some form of China on the scene. For the most part, I'd argue this is a good thing because for a lot of us in the West, we tend to just see China as the other. And in fact, it's even vilified. So it allows us to see China as another nation, as another country, as another people who live on their terms, live in their economic and political systems. And they're not just other. They're not just, this is a foreign place in a foreign land where, ooh, we have mysterious Chinese stuff, but don't go there because China bad, but China culture interesting sometimes. I feel like there was this divide of people who you either liked China or were cool with visiting China or being interested in Chinese culture or just Asian culture on the whole, and China got stuck in that category. Or you were like, no, China bad. I have no further arguments. Thank you. In the past, China felt a little off the mark when trying to appeal to a international audience. A lot of the time, it would come across as uncool or too forced. Now, China is everywhere. Like I was saying, tech apps, EVs, city skylines, gaming, social media. Right now, we're not being told to admire China or that China's cool. We just notice it, we think it's cool, and we're on board. We're there. We're like, I want some of that Chinese life. Now, of course, there will still be some fetishization. There will be that lens of Orientalism that still hovers over China. However, I would argue that the lens has broadened. People can actually see a more realistic and a more accurate idea of what China is like and what Chinese people are like. And I think overall that's a good thing as more and more things come to the surface and we're not just encouraged to follow the general narrative put out by big media. So why does it seem so seamless, and why am I saying that China is good at soft power? I'll go into a few of these. For one, we have a lot of influencers who now come to China and check it out and give organic feedback of what it's like to visit China. And we've had these for a long time as well, but we have people who are lifestyle vloggers or bloggers who live in China and have lived in China for decades. A lot of their videos and blogs are actually coming to mainstream relevance now. So we're getting not only what it looks like to travel to China as a visitor, but what it's like to live long term in China as a foreigner. This type of culture sharing is organic. It is not politics. It is not media as much as it would be a kung fu movie. It is people to people. It is human to human. People relate to that a lot more. I can relate to the vlogger who goes to a different country or someone who lives in a different country rather than the big budget kung fu movie or action blockbuster meant to highlight whatever sort of soft power from whatever country. Social media, too. Some of our biggest social media apps now have originated in China. We have TikTok. There's a lot of debate over that. Now, even Little Red Now, Xiao Hongshu has come over to Western audiences as well. So there's more interaction between foreigners and Chinese people as a whole, which bridges the gap. It, again, is that people to people connection. And of course, there's technology. Some of this you probably have now in your home country, or you've seen it online. The Xiaomi phones, the Xiaomi cars, the EVs that are now being sold across Europe, that are now most likely coming to Canada. There's just so much that makes us curious as foreigners about China. High speed rails, public services. So much out there at the moment, it's making us question. For example, if you're in a Western society, it makes us question, hey, this might not be the only structure. There might be something different. We don't know if it's better, but it offers a different way of laying out life in society. All this sort of gets us in an immersive bubble, a Chinese bubble. It allows us to experience it secondhand. A lot of you probably haven't been to China, but you have a much more clearer picture on what China might be like. If you look at the video that I'm making here, this is what it's like to walk around Sheshan Hill. It's just a experience shared now via video to you, the viewer. Of course, now in that cultural bubble, we have video games like Dark Myth Wukong, Genshin Impact, and the list is only growing. And a lot of gamers are feeling that Chinese games are catering more to the interest of actual gamers. Some people are, in fact, getting tired of the big budget AAA Western titles. It's not to say they're all bad, but again, it's offering an alternative. And of course, there's the Chinese aesthetic, whether it's the skylines, the clean metros, the night markets, the cafes, the fashion. China now exports this image of itself. People have an idea what the megacities look like, what the streets look like. It's clean, it's tidy, and it's starting to get that reputation that I'd say Japan used to have, where a lot of Westerners would be like, I want to go to Japan. They'd have no idea of anything in Japan. They'd actually have very little knowledge on the culture of Japan itself and sometimes just be straight weeaboos. But they'd be like, I'm going to Japan because I like anime. And I will say that's kind of not the best mindset to go anywhere with. However, it's at least getting people's foot in the door. It's getting people to go, hey, China actually looks interesting. Maybe I could learn something. So another good example for this outside of China would be Egyptian culture. Egyptian culture is very mesmerizing in the fact that ancient Egypt, it's one of the oldest civilizations with preserved history. These days you can still go visit the mummies, visit the King Tut exhibit, and it's just something that grabs people's attention. China is one of those old cultures too. Whether you're looking at the new developed China megacities or you're like, hey, I am very interested in old Chinese culture, whether it would be calligraphy, Chinese architecture, Chinese literature. There's just so many things to dive in. Such a rich and long-standing culture fascinates people. And it's not like these things didn't exist in the past. It's just China's kind of cool now. So people are more inclined to learn, people are more inclined to visit. So it might start with a superficial understanding of the culture, but it goes so much deeper than that. When I first went to China in 2018, my dad flipped his lid. He's like, China's dangerous. China, they don't have running water. Nowadays, my dad thinks China is a model for modern development. And it didn't get that way overnight. It really goes to show how much China is able to show its influence in development when you have my father in his 70s, who is quite bigoted, mind you, be able to change his opinion at that age. So, if Chinese soft power can get my somewhat racist, bigoted dad to change his mind on China, I'm betting it's going to affect the new generation more than people would expect. A little bit beyond this, something that a lot of Westerners don't actually realize is that China isn't just appealing to the US and Europe, it is looking out toward Asia as well. When I lived in Malaysia several years ago, I could see people's point of view slowly changing on China. There was sometimes a negative idea about China, but as China's economic situation improved and how the living standards improved, a lot of people started to look in these countries of Southeast Asia or other countries in the global south. A lot of them started looking at China as a guideline or a blueprint. And this has worked so well because China knew to lean into that. They have developed many initiatives in Southeast Asia and Africa, the Belt and Road Initiative, other building projects. So China became known for what it was doing around the world as a sort of benefit to a lot of the global south. Not to say that China was just being altruistic about it. These were business deals. China does a lot of business with a lot of countries. So this kind of favored the outlook on China. Now, a lot of the countries in the global south feel like China protects their interests more than a lot of Western powers do. Why? Because a lot of Western powers have been complacent with a lot of the struggles the global south is dealing with. China also has a shared history with the global south of being under colonial rule. That's why a lot of countries from the global south look at China as a sort of underdog that has risen up to challenge the global status quo. To many members of the global south, this is a victory, and they perceive themselves as being on this team. They also look at themselves as underdogs with a shared colonial history. And if you look at the most recent polls, most members of the global south seem to favor China over the USA. Global perspective is changing. It's due to geopolitics, but it's also a very real impact that Chinese soft power has essentially become a force to be reckoned with. And it didn't achieve this by aggressively pushing to the front of the line or being the loudest in the room. Rather, it was achieved through a subtle and quiet art of rising like a sleeping dragon. And when the world noticed, that dragon had already awoken. Perhaps a bit theatrical, but what do you all think? Do you think China is just the next big trend? Is it going to simmer down now that we're in 2026? Or are you planning your trip to become more Chinese?